Welcome to episode 112 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak life, encouragement, and truth into the minds and hearts of educators and get you energized for the week ahead. Today, I'm back with the second half of my conversation with master teachers Tamara Russell and Sarah Plumitallo. And we're talking about how to earn trust with families in poverty and empower parents as education partners. Visit truthforteachers.com to get a summary of the key takeaways for this episode and last week's episode. You can also share your thoughts in the comments. So this week's episode is a continuation of episode 111, in which Sarah and Tamara shared the classroom-based strategies that they use in Title I schools. If you haven't yet listened to that episode, I highly recommend that you start there because we talked about some really powerful and out-of-the-box insights and important mindset shifts that lay the groundwork for what we're going to talk about next. As a heads up, Tamara Russell is a national board certified middle childhood generalist with 20 years of teaching experience. She's a third grade teacher currently and has taught first grade in the past. Sarah Plumitallo is currently teaching ESOL students in grades 2 to 5 in a Title I school in Northern Virginia. Sarah and Tamara are super close friends, and I've had the privilege of connecting with them on Voxer for the last couple of months, where we've had countless conversations about an issue that we're very passionate about, which is education equity. They've shared so much wisdom with me in these private conversations that it just started to feel like a shame that no one else was getting to listen in. So I invited them both on the show so that more educators can learn from their experiences. Our conversation ended up running over an hour that day. And when I went back through the recording to edit it down, I realized that 90% of it was just too good to cut. So I made the decision for the first time ever on this show to air almost the entire interview and to split it into 2 episodes. So the first half of our conversation was focused on the classroom-based work, and the last 20 minutes or so, which you're about to hear now, is focused on building trust and relationships with families. So let's go ahead and dive in. Okay, so we're going to move on now to the third and final strategy for working with kids in high poverty classrooms, things that are actually going to get results. And the third thing is to build trust with families. And you do that by empowering parents to believe that they are worthy as their children's first teacher and helping them see their kids as high performing. And I want to clarify for everybody listening to this, I did not come up with that myself. That was brilliance that you two unleashed in a Voxer conversation. So that phrasing came directly from the two of you talking about, I think Tamara, I think you were the one talking about empowering parents to believe they are worthy. So I'm really looking forward to delving into this segment because you've got a lot of great things to say. So can we start off by talking about how to build that trust or like earning back trust in a school system, especially with parents who feel like they've been marginalized by the school system themselves?
Interestingly enough, I feel like some of the parents that I've worked with don't even recognize that they've been marginalized by the school system because I think they've internalized it. They're adults at this point, and maybe they, see that their own students might be struggling with academics or struggling with behavior. And so they think, oh, well, my kid got it honestly. But I think when you're a parent that's been told in the school system, you're not smart enough or you're not compliant enough or whatever it is that you're not enough, you carry that with you and think, well, maybe I'm just not a learner. And so when you want to have parents come and talk about their students and the only things that the parents ever hear is that their student is non-compliant or their student doesn't want to participate or the student is defiant, it kind of doubles down on that feeling as a parent that, well, I failed academically and now maybe as a parent too, the school just thinks I can't parent my kid. And it doesn't make parents want to show up at school. It just would make most of them run. And that is so unfortunate that we've isolated a lot of our parents from the school experience. So some of the things that I've done in the past with my parents, I've done something called Teacher Talk Tuesday, where for the parents who are able to make it out on a Tuesday night, I just talk about some of the things that I'm going to be teaching and the ways in which I'm going to be teaching it. Sometimes I'll do videos or I'll do an audio component to that for parents who aren't able to be there so that they can hear what I'm saying to their kids if they would like to work with their students at home or they have a caregiver that's going to be working with their student, grandparent or whatever, and they want to be connected to the classroom. They just want to learn how to say things the way I'm saying it. I've done things like that before for parents. I also talk to parents explicitly about the the expectations that I have for their kids with regard to their IEPs or with their 504 plans. These are all the things that your student has a right to doing. This is the support that they have a right to having. Please make sure you're asking them, from time to time if they're getting their support at school, because I'm trying to make sure that they get it. Just empowering parents with the knowledge that the school is taking care of your kid. I'm taking care of your kid. We are doing this together. And when I want to change things to a student's IEP, or when I want to change things to a student's 504 plan, I engage the parent. What are things that you feel like your kid needs? What is your kid articulating to you at home with homework? What are they frustrated with at school? Let's talk about that so I can add your ideas and your voice to what's happening here at the school site, because parents are our greatest advocate with our children.
right.
They know their kids better than we know their kids.
Absolutely.
No one's going to love my students more than their parents do. And so when I bring them in and I bring them to the table and I say, I want to hear your voice and I want to add your voice to whatever I'm doing with the students, that gives some of that power back to them. Even if they didn't feel like they were the greatest student, they now feel like, hey, I have a voice at least with my kid, and I can make sure that my kid does well, and they feel good about school and they love this experience. Oh, there's one other thing that I've done too. I do like nights at the school where I have the parents come and see the students perform things, academic things at school. I've done plays with my students on Black History Month. I've done musicals with my students, just, first grade students or my third grade students. And I have the parents show up for things like that. And I find that my parents overall have enjoyed those experiences, poetry slam nights and things like that. They will come to watch their kids do amazing things that are academic. They love that stuff. And so creating those environments, positive environments for parents to experience at the school site, I find has been super helpful for me.
Yeah, I would just echo that. And especially the sentiment of no one will love or know that child better than their family, full stop. No matter how much time I spend with their child, no matter how much I love and adore their child, no one will ever be as good as their family in terms of advocating, knowing, supporting, everything. And I think that as teachers, we have got to stop judging families.
Yes.
And regardless of how they look, we have got to stop judging families, and we have to start acting as if they are the critical link to success for our children, because they are. They are that critical link, and we have to tell them.
Yes.
We have to tell them that. The best thing I ever did was start at the first conference I had, at the first quarter conference every year, telling every parent that I was so thankful for how they supported their child and what a difference that made in terms of my job. Because they needed to hear from me that, one, they are doing a good job as a parent, because it can be so intimidating to walk into a school not knowing what you're going to hear, to not know whether or not the teacher is judging you or think you could do X, Y, and Z better. As a mom, I face that. It is intimidating. And I'm a teacher and I know the system, right? But I think that when they hear that, when they hear that you are valuing their contribution to this process, that makes everything else from there that much better. It makes every time you have to make a difficult phone call that much easier. It makes every challenging assignment that much more attainable, because they see themselves as capable. And I think sometimes we take for granted that parents don't see themselves as less than us.
Yes.
Because in many cultures, parents defer to the teacher, because the teacher is the expert. And while we may be the professional expert, they are the expert on their child, and we need them. We need them. And I look them in the eye and tell them, I need you as my partner because I need your help. I need to understand how I can help your child learn. And so when I am struggling to teach a child, when I am struggling with how to reach them with a strategy, yes, I'm going to consult best practice and, Yes, I'm going to look for research-based strategies, but I am also going to call their parent on the phone, or their grandma, or whomever is in their home. And I'm going to ask what they think, because what they think matters. And I think we've got to stop taking that for granted. And again, this is about a relationship. This is not a one-off conversation. It's not a one-off message or a point on Class Dojo. This is a ongoing relationship between teacher and family. And it's one that, yes, it is going to take time, and it's going to take energy to sustain. But it is worth it, because that child, that student, that learner will see how much you value them, how much you value their family. And it builds that trust and that vulnerability that they need in order to learn. Because when a child walks into your classroom and you're asking them to be okay with failure in order to grow, you're asking them to allow themselves to be vulnerable to you. They have to know that it's worth trusting you. And when you have partnered with their family, they will do that. They will be vulnerable. The parents will be vulnerable. The family will engage, but you have to treat them as if they are that missing and critical link, because they are.
Yeah. And I think that in order to get yourself to that place, it requires a lot of self-reflection and a lot of internal work, because we all have personal biases. Particularly if you're working with families in poverty, a lot of times teachers buy into the myth that they don't value education, or they don't care about their kids, or they're not parenting them properly. And when we have those beliefs, even if it's not at the forefront of our mind, if that's a deep-rooted, deep-seated, almost subconscious belief that we hold because their cultural norms are different than ours, or their value system seems to be different, or it's expressed in a different way, if we see them as other and we see them as different than us, that comes across in our communication, whether we realize it or not.
Absolutely,
and
it does.
Parents will feel that. They will feel that you place yourself on a higher plane because you have a college degree in education. And so I think that a big part of this is truly believing that the parent is worthy as the child's first teacher, and rooting out your own personal biases. Can either one of you or both of you? Both of you can speak to that a lot. I know.
I would say that for me, not being bilingual and having to understand the difficulty that families face trying to engage in a monolingual school system, that has been and continues to be the thing that I think about, because not all teachers and not all families are going to be lucky to have as many supports in place as I am in my system, my school system. And I think that we have to examine what we see as, well, why don't they just learn English? Or why don't they just do XYZ? We don't ever really sit down and think about the lengths to which we're asking families to go without offering a hand, without supporting them in that. And I think for me, trying to think about the difficulties that some families go through just to make it to a parent-teacher conference, I can't understand that from a level of having experienced it. But it's something that I've got to think about, because I, again, need my families to know that they are the most important thing to me. But I have to unpack what I see as the norm, because it's my norm, it's my privilege. And so I think that every teacher, regardless of background or experiences, has some level of privileged thinking on this in some facet. And I think we've got to really examine it for ourselves and think about all of the barriers that we put up or the system puts up, and work to bring them down.
I agree. I think we've got to, as teachers, stop coming from the deficit model of thinking that our families are culpable in their poverty. And because we see that they are culpable in their poverty, no wonder this mother doesn't want to show up at these parent conferences. And so because this mother is not showing up at these parent conferences, and she's not a good parent. See how we go there? We make a line all the way to that, because they're not showing up for what's important to us, but they may be showing up to something that's important for them, like getting to, the person who's collecting the money for the light bill, and they got to get to them, or they've got to come to us. You know what? They're not going to come to us. And they may not tell us that because we haven't built enough community with them to understand that.
For them to say it,
They may not want to come to school, not because they don't feel like they want to come, but maybe they don't have transportation to come. But maybe they do a phone conference, maybe they'd be willing to text, but we only see it in one way. We don't look at our parents as people who want to participate but don't always have a model. There's no model for parenting. There's no book when you get pregnant that somebody hands to you and says, in this book is contained all of the wisdom and knowledge that you're going to need to raise a child. But when you are looking at your own peer set, your own skill set, you would give grace to the person next to you and say, oh, well, Sarah, my friend Sarah here, she couldn't make it to her parent conference. I would never think that Sarah wasn't a good parent, but I'm going to turn around and do that to the students in my class because the parent is poor.
Absolutely.
That's because I think that they're culpable in that poverty. If they weren't so lazy, or if they weren't so whatever, then they wouldn't be poor. And that's a fundamental flaw in the understanding of how we have poverty in this country. We can't think about our parents as deficient. And if we would give grace to our own peer set, people that we know and we've built trust relationships with, then we need to continue to press on and build those trust relationships with the families in our own schools, and understand that we don't have to understand everything about why our kids' parents are not at school or not participating in the way that we would want. We have to find a way to give them a model so that they can participate, because these parents do want to participate. They don't always know what's best, or are not always given every opportunity to be able to participate in a way that would work for them. We need to be able to offer that.
Absolutely.
What's something that you wish every teacher knew about working with students and families in high poverty communities?
I would say that. I feel like there's a lot that goes into the culture of failure in high poverty schools. And a lot of times it's systemic issues and deficit thinking. It's not always just these kids can't, or these kids won't, or these parents don't care. It's not that simple. There are systemic issues in the public school system that there are teachers across the country trying to bring light to and trying to bring change to. And when we can really uproot those systems in our public school system, the school system will work better for all of the children, whether they come from a home of privilege or a home of poverty, or not a home of poverty, but if they're living in poverty, they're going to still be successful. But there's systemic issues that I feel like we need to work on in public school, and we're doing it. And these conversations that we're having here, I think, are beginning to start that.
Yeah. I would say that you're not there to be the white knight riding in to save everything, that you are not there to save them, that you alone are not the answer. Because I think that, one, that's an inordinate amount of pressure, and it's generally inexperienced teachers that begin in schools of poverty. And two, that places you, the teacher, on a pedestal that you do not belong on. I don't belong on that pedestal. I am not here to save the students or families I work with. They are plenty capable. They have value, worth, capacity for success, all of it. I have to figure out how I can support them in getting there. Support, not do for them. Support.
Well, I think you both have given us a lot of things to think about here. My head is just full. And I think what I'm most excited about is the fact that you're going to be continuing these conversations on your own podcast. So It's in the works. I have not heard it yet, but I am so excited about it. And I want you guys to tell Truth for Teachers listeners about your podcast. And that way, when they hear this episode, they can get over there and subscribe, because the exact same things that we talked about tonight is the focus of your entire podcast. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
We are really excited to kind of unpack and discuss with teachers how they can practically look for ways to have a more equitable classroom, maybe infuse some social justice in there. What would that look like, practically speaking, on a day-to-day basis? And so we're hoping to support teachers who are excited about looking for ways to make learning more approachable and accessible to all of their learners, whether they're ELL, ESE, or they come from poverty, but we want to make sure that all learners are having a fair chance to get an education. And so we're going to be talking about lots of different things that we're doing in the classroom, and we hope it'll be a support to teachers.
Yeah. I mean, that's really the goal here, is that when teachers have the knowledge and the perspective and the space in which to talk about these things, the students are the ones that benefit, and that's really our end goal. And so, we're excited about equity. Now, it's T. Why is it T, Tamara? We got to tell them why it's T.
So when you talk so much about a serious topic like equity, you need to also balance that with levity and light and life and fun. And Sarah and I love to have fun together. And we've been friends for a couple years, and we just enjoy laughing about just the petty ridiculousness sometimes that happens in school. So we will be talking about equity, but there will also be a lot of fun and a lot of just crazy, silly zaniness on our podcast. So we're excited about both elements.
So if any Truth for Teachers listeners are looking for a new podcast, check out Equity by searching for Equity in your podcast player app so that you can subscribe. It's EQUI-TEA. And if you click the show notes for this episode, so go to the little information button for this episode, you can also get a link directly there to both the Equity site, more materials about it, and the podcast itself. So you can go through either way. And of course, you can find Sarah and Tamara in various online spaces. Sarah's materials and Teachers Pay Teachers store are called Sarah Plumitallo's Resources for Diverse Learners. And you can find Tamara Russell in all of the social media spaces and on TPT under the name Mrs. Russell's Classroom. I highly encourage you to follow both of them on whichever platform you prefer, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, wherever. But check out their social media resources. They share great articles and resources and start these kinds of conversations all the time. And also check out Equity if you'd like to hear more conversations like the one you heard today. Have a fantastic week. And remember, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be worth it. Truth for Teachers is a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. For more great podcast recommendations, go to edupodcastnetwork.com. That's edupodcastnetwork.com.